so I can try to follow implementation. So, ADE25 is taught, I will start with context, which is in the context of digital classroom issues of youth employment in Morocco, and better then you can go to a quick switch review, show some theories behind and Chilean process. Okay, nice to I can say this all the time. Okay. And later then some standard facts about Moroccan labor market, especially in employment and
Please forward it, but
because I have a problem, I miss my dad. So I'm very sorry now. Yes. And last with the impacts of the revolution. So talking about the context of the Moroccan labor market, which faces us for so many developing countries, high structural employment, particularly among youth workers, according to the S&P public institution responsible for statistics. And this can be explained by some too many localization of formal jobs and mismatch between education and employment, and also limited access to information about opportunities. So, to give a small example, with me and another candidate with same diploma, same experience, and 6 years, at the same labor market implementation, we don't have the opportunities or same chances to get access to information. So digital platforms here are emerging as innovative solutions sure to improve for matching jobs, matching between job seekers and employers, and providing us a reduction of switch costs, user transparency, and broader access to job postings. So the main research question is to what extent do digital recruitment platforms contribute to the professional situation of youth in Morocco? So, as we know, as for many developing countries, we said, the rapid development of these platforms sure raises hopes for employment trends, and especially related to innovation. And however, the actual effectiveness is reducing youth unemployment remains uncertain. So, this work and this paper aims to empirically assess the impact of these digital tools based on the Moroccan context. So, that's an literature review, and we all know how digital platform reduces labor market friction, according to many authors, and facilitating matching between supply and demand by reducing decision and information assumptions. And some of the large-scale implementations talking here about application congestion and skill expansion between or with actual employer needs. So, some criticism we say platforms are not networks, so how algorithms are supposed to evaluate candidates passing through the recruitment process and such. So there is some risk of reducing social inequality and algorithmic bias. So you are supposed to solve this problem, and this is there you just produce it. So the need for regulation to ensure fairness, transparency, and inclusion are necessary. So answer to impact on wages and pay rates, according to the advantage for providers with online monitoring, so it may be a discrimination for nuance on the platform, and high rates not guaranteed. In Africa, it has limited impact. We are talking about adoption and the culture of employment. So there is a low employer adoption and technological access inequalities. And especially in Morocco, the ongoing initiative of ANAPEC is going well, especially, and you can see this in the history of ANAPEC experience, but with persons barriers. And with limited digital support for young job seekers, you can see some gap between rural areas and Europe. And for sure, this effectiveness depends on, according to many principal authors, quality of algorithms, training in the use of digital tools, and employer adoption. So, some statistics about the Moroccan labor market between 2014 and 2024, the unemployment rate, say from 16 to tomorrow we're talking very short, so I'm trying to be concentrated all the time. And national labor force participation rate remains stagnant at around 43.5, which is still low, reflecting a growing disengagement, especially among rural youth who are often motivated by the lack of economic opportunities, which is always the case. And it may be shown by a structural divide. For example, in 2024, in rural areas, activity rate is declining from to 365% with significant job growth in agriculture, which may be explained by migration from rural areas to urban ones looking for better opportunities. In urban areas, a slight improvement is observed, mainly due to supply and employment, formal employment show. Of course, with some gaps and the gender inequalities, with still marginal inclusion for female labor force. Growth is driven by urban areas and services sector. So, for example, in 2024, plus than 82,000 jobs created, but with a significant balance between areas and, of course, this high so many realities in urban, plus than 162,000 jobs creation in services, industrial, public sector, but decline in agriculture in rural areas. So this may lead to question about transition toward more formal employment, which is not the case. So the decline in unpaid work, for example, in rural areas may signal for sure part of this statistic. Reduction in informal employment is also a loss of resilience in survival-based economic strategies. So those are some I will pass away. You can find later the paper and with more detailed statistics. And I'm going to go right away to talk quickly about the history and structure of the intermediation market, because it's so important to understand why many young use the analytic platform and not the more developed ones. So analytic is the result of a progressive structuring of public employment services in mainly in Morocco with municipal employment services, and then we have this job, I can explain it later, and right into analytic by 2001. So the mission as a classification is to support for job seekers, services for companies and schemes analysis. And now in Morocco we have like 12 regional agencies, 96 local agencies, and more than 10 university branches and local units. And next to that, we have these private agencies. They have their own digital platforms. For sure, we can see the number of these private agencies, which is more aware than Arabic, but try to see why people are preferring Arabic with small opportunities, but they still choose to use research in that. So, this modernized transition into the labor markets, we have in 2000 first job boards as recruit and employment that we aid as a complementary to the traditional methods. So, and then we have the rise of more advanced actors like Novo, based in Morocco for sure, but coming to nurse, I don't know if it's a positive progress, but it's accelerated the digitalization according to video conference and attitude automation. And later then we have over 30% of recruitments in large companies are conducted online. So this is a small view for growth of private recruitment agencies between 2010 and 2024. Also with growth of platform business, but the main question is its effect. So those are some general trends about users profile. As we see, we have 65% of users are renewable waste, which is so big, and then 72% come from higher education, while 28% from vocational training. And so many other statistics that might be good to know before arriving to the. So this is a small idea about dynamic sectors. and most demanding jobs. Also, maybe about the average trying to find employment and to see the difference between urban and rural areas. For example, we have the shoring, which has a strong demand for call center agents. And then, as we see, shoring, promoting ICT, education training, tourism, and technology. So those are main 5 sectors accounts for more than 30% of recruitment intentions. Also, this may give an idea about qualification level in Denmark. For example, 34% of job offers require a bachelor's degree, okay, or higher. And of course, this is faster in urban areas for by talking about job search duration moving from 3-5 months in urban areas and showing for like 3-4 months. But it's way more longer in rural areas for say low skill profiles up to 1 year or more. So arriving to impact evaluation, the objective, as I said, is to assess whether digital platforms actually improve the integration of young graduates into the labor market. So I think that's a good reminder of the current framework, as we need to confirm two potential outcomes, and there are then other treatment while doing one in one, but it's not possible. So we use different approach to and control group for sure, before and after the intervention, and after seeing parameters and most stronger assumptions. So the econometric model is defined by this, and the net effect estimation DAV of the impact. So this is just the logical modeling. So this is just a quite commanded graphical. We assume that both groups are having the same evolution, and then thanks to say after the integration we have this small change which can be addressed to the platform work. So for the data, we're going to use big data from 2021 to 2024 based on 2 groups. So treating group going to be users of digital platforms, and control group going to be beneficiaries of in-person services only. So target people like 1,825 graduates, and one way to some key social mark variables between and control difference to assume that both groups are comparable. So we're going to make some tests of baseline balance. We're going to have the test for comparison means, standardized mean differences to assess gaps of sample size, and so many others. The important thing to take from this is both groups are comparable. So only thing left is to assume the parallel trends. So before using platform, both groups will have the same evolution with no differences. So we can now attack the fact assessment. So some of the results regarding average effects on youth requirements. The interaction between term of choice, of course, is positive and significant, and we can say that platform users have 4.2 percentage points higher quality of requirements in 2024 compared to youth. So choice providers here is age, gender, education level, and race qualities. So we must say that this might be the first round of technology indication that platform contributes positively to youth labor participation. Yes. And later there we have positive significant coefficient of interaction with education, which shows that stronger effects for youth with human capital and digital skills, and also for urban residents it's better. Of course, we know when we have better digital infrastructure and more local opportunities, so it's better for youth graduates from urban areas. And later then, try to see the accent and speed of integration among these youth graduates. on average job situation, month, probability of being employed, and monthly salary of employed individuals. So for job search duration, we found that platform users find a job one that 21 months earlier on average, significant result, which shows that improved information flow, automatic follow-up, and easier application process and access. Also, for probability of employment, we have this average range of 4.2 percentage points, strong result which confirms that the platform's effectiveness in improving job access. So this is a comparative employment insurance by the used value from 2021 to 2024. We can see this difference between platform users and non-users. Also differences what it shows on effect on employment probability. You can see this difference between control group and treated before intervention and after intervention, which shows that treated group improved significantly more between 2021 and 2024, indicating a positive platform effect. So this also for average job situation, which can see platform use can read this probability of finding job, but now with search duration and as we see job seekers using digital platforms, so they find employment faster than other non-users. So that was the presentation. Thank you everyone for the attention.
Thank you for a great presentation and very nicely written paper, by the way. I think I'll skip in the interest of time the summary of the paper and just talk a little bit about why this is important. And I think we all know that labor markets in general are largely very, very imperfect markets. It's an ongoing theme in labor economics. And I think that speaks to a larger issue, which is that job creation in itself isn't like a silver bullet. It's not the only thing we do. We also need to think about how to actually match the people in the labor market perspective, employees in the labor market to the employers. And I think in theory at least what Anas has presented talks about digital platforms which theoretically should solve this issue, and there's a large literature about how digital platforms tend to do this. And I think Morocco is such an important country to look at is that because it's such a perfect fit for what Anas is trying to do, which is look at the impact of digital platform, because it's really high unemployment, especially for young people, and there's a large rural-urban divide. And but at the same time, I think there's internet penetration, technology penetration has continued to improve. So it's almost like this perfect storm of a place where digital platforms could, in fact, make a large impact, and that's exactly what Anas shows. So my main criticism with Anas's paper is largely a fairly technical one, perhaps a small one, but it's to do with your differences in methodology. If you think about like a canonical difference in differences, the way it works is like you have pro groups. There's a treatment group and then there's a control group, and what happens is like an exogenous treatment that happens in somewhere after your baseline, and it impacts only one of the groups, and it doesn't impact the other group, and then you take the differences across the two groups, both before and after, and you get your treatment effect. What you have is somewhat slightly technically a little bit different, which is that it's not like digital platforms just emerge exogenously into Morocco and they weren't there before. What you have is in fact that right at your pre-treatment period, there are some individuals who choose to sign up on digital platforms. And then there are those who don't choose to sign up on that. And I think that creates sort of a weird econometric issue where somebody could, a reviewer of this paper could just step up and say, okay, but are there potential outcomes similar, even once you control for some of the treatments? And I think that creates sort of an interesting issue in your paper where you have to sort of address this, in my opinion, explicitly. Because what you show right now is a treatment effect and very impressive result, like the 4.1 percentage points, 4.2 percentage points increases the probability of employment, 1.21 months sooner you get a job. I would argue that it's sort of risky to present that as sort of causally valid results. What you could do instead is sort of just say that it's the association between being a platform user in 2024 and before that. And you can ask yourself the question, or somebody could ask the question, that is it the case that people who choose to sign up to these digital platforms are people who are more likely to find jobs in the first place, which is, for example, might explain why your results are driven by educated young people. And I think what you could do is over here is perhaps just to maybe before you submit to a journal, maybe like make a small correction over here, maybe compare apples with apples, or what you could do is there are a bunch of techniques out there. You could do maybe synthetic controls could be one, you could do some sort of matching. But I think that might be something that you in fact need to address. And then we'll close quickly with some implications of your research. So I think it's an important paper because the results actually smell very good, where they're very convincing, and I want to buy into them, but I think it's just that little tiny hold up with methodology that I think might be something that you need to address. But nevertheless, I think it has great implications for the developing world labor markets in general, including our part of the world, which is, in my one-line conclusion from your paper, is it's not enough to just have jobs, but to also look into how you can match prospective employees with that job, and with that, I'd like to. So I find myself in a precarious position between you all and lunch. So I try to not torture you too much. So I'm going to present my paper on, it's the colleague of mine, Yashodhan Goldberg, who's a senior economist at the Social Protection Unit in the World Bank. And this paper is about a term I'll introduce very soon on occupational downgrading and how that varies with conflict. And the motivation behind this is that when you have conflict or economic insecurity that follows from conflict, it sort of creates in a country pressures to want to migrate abroad. And sometimes what those pressures could lead to is that potentially high-skilled individuals may settle for a job that they're perhaps overqualified for. And that's sort of a bad outcome for both the host country and the country where you are migrating out from, because at one end it creates what is called brain drain, a term we're all familiar with, but also perhaps brain waste abroad, where potential high-skilled employees, talents is going to waste. You can think of this like an engineer who's settling for a job as a taxi driver. And that's what this paper sort of looks into, how conflict derives some of these effects. And so the way we do this is to ask ourselves a fundamental question, which is, how much of a wage premium would a potential economic migrant accept to take on occupational downgrading, which is to take on their brain potentially being wasted abroad? And the next question we ask ourselves is, how does conflict change that? That's really what this paper is about. And I'm going to take you to talk a little bit about the context of the country that we look into, which is Myanmar. And Myanmar is a Southeast Asian country. It's a very strategically located between China, India, Bangladesh, and Thailand. And pretty much since it got its independence from the British in 1948, there's been a series of crises, largely involving tensions between the military and the civilian leadership. Most recently, though, in February 2021, Aung San Suu Kyi was a Nobel laureate. She's her government, her party NLD was overthrown by the military, went down over in one of the many coups that the military has had. And Aung San Suu Kyi is an overwhelmingly popular leader in Myanmar, has been in prison ever since. My Pakistani colleague might be able to relate that in some eerie sense. But nevertheless, it has followed, what has followed in Myanmar has been a humanitarian crisis comparable with any other. It's 57,000 people have been killed, about a fifth of the country's population has been displaced. The World Bank estimates that GDP in Myanmar is still about like 10 percentage points below pre-pandemic levels, and what that naturally leads to is a lot of young people want to migrate out of the country, as you can expect. Now, the way we talk about migration in general is that we develop a framework on how economic agents make the decision to migrate, but I'm sure absolutely nobody wants to see that math right now. So what I'll do instead is tell you what the summary of the model is, and then maybe do an example with you just to show what we're trying to get at. So here's what the model starts with a paper by David McKinsey, who says that in the absence of contract, generally the way people make economic decisions is a very simple calculation. You would migrate abroad if the benefits that you get from a job abroad, your utility from wages and other things, would exceed the benefits that you get from a job at home, and plus any cost of migration. Now, what we do is sort of make, firstly, a very minor addition to it. We argue that people can derive benefit from a job in addition to their wages. For example, one thing that we introduce in this paper is to talk about how people may also derive utility from job suitability, for example, how suitable your job is to your qualifications. And with a little bit of math, you can show that this induces, or what we call a break-even wage premium, or delta W. It's sort of the idea that if I add to your wage at home some wage premium delta W, such that you will be indifferent between staying at home and moving abroad. And this depends on a number of factors. I'll just do a quick example for you. Imagine that you derive 10,000 units of utility from your job at home, and 8,000 utilities from your job abroad, and the partial derivative of utility with respect to wages is 10. Then this individual will want $200 in addition to their current wage to make them indifferent between staying at home and migrating abroad. Now, what if there is another job, or what if your job abroad is not particularly suitable to your skill set? For example, something either through a labor market mismatch or perhaps something you're overqualified for. What would happen to that break-even wage premium? Now, we propose that in general you would want a higher wage premium to offset the disutility that you get from being placed into an otherwise bad job. So if you ask an engineer right now, how much would you want to migrate abroad for a similar job, and versus working as a taxi driver, you would probably expect that they would want a higher wage to offset that disutility from working as a taxi driver. Just to do a quick example of this, imagine like for a similar job to mine, I would want a 10% wage premium to migrate abroad, and for a job that is not particularly suitable to my qualifications, I want a 15% wage premium. And so the difference of 5 percentage points is the additional premium I'm demanding to offset the disutility from being placed into an inferior job, or what I perceive as an inferior job. We call this the compensating wage differential, which I will immediately call CWD for a good part of this presentation. It's really about how much in dollar terms you need to allow or to let your brain go to waste abroad. And if you think about it, this sort of also measures to some extent how desperate you are in the labor market, or how much patience you have in the labor market. This paper particularly looks at how some of those things, or how the compensating wage differential is driven by conflict, or how your exposure to conflict at home. So we have two concepts, the break-even wage premium and the compensating wage differential. Now, how do we measure this? Well, we did a survey last year. It's called the Data survey in Myanmar. And what we did was we spoke to like a representative sample of 2,400 high-skilled young individuals. And I say high-skilled, they all have a bachelor's degree. They're all between 18 to 45 years old. And they all, at the time of the survey, had a job. So they were employed. And so what we do is we collect some basic information and talk about how we make the computation of whether I'm discussing in this paper. But we also, at some level, merge the findings or the data of that survey with data from this institution called ADE25, which collects very detailed conflict data on events and fatalities that happens in different locations around the world, including in Myanmar. And so just to show you how this works, after we collect some basic demographic information, in our migration module, we pose the following hypothetical scenario. Now, imagine this respondent, call it respondent A, is a person who's already indicated to us that currently in Myanmar they're working for 500,000 Myanmar kyat. And we asked them earlier if they had to migrate. They said they would have migrated to Dubai. So we asked them, pre-filled information, we asked them, imagine the situation. You are offered a job in Dubai and it involves the same type of work that you currently do. and it pays you exactly 500,000 Myanmar baht. Would you take that job? And you can answer yes or no. You would expect a lot of people would immediately say no, just making any calculations in their head. So what we do then is follow it up with another question where we say, okay, but what if you say no, what if we increase this to 20%? And we keep doing this until the person flips their answer from a no to a yes. So in this case, this person, for example, keeps saying no to any job in Dubai until you pay them an 80% premium on their current wage in Myanmar. And so for this person, this 80% increase is the break-even wage premium to make them consider my grading. And you can imagine for somebody who would say yes right away, they actually start decreasing the wage premium until they flip their answer. Now in this paper, what we do next is pose another set of hypothetical questions, the same thing, except this time we don't say a similar job, but we say a cashier in a supermarket. Imagine this is a job, it pays you whatever you're earning, but this time you'll be working as a cashier in a supermarket. And then you do the same module again. And you would imagine that in order to be working as a cashier in a supermarket, they ask for a higher wage premium, and that's exactly what we see. Some quick results over here. On average, people demand a 171 percentage points premium over their current wage to migrate abroad for a similar job, but at 192 percentage point premium to migrate for a cashier job. So this difference of 21 percentage points is the compensating wage differential. And just to show you how well this works, if you look at the compensating wage differential by subgroup of respondents, it's particularly high for people who are in managerial roles, which you can expect if you have a comfy white collar job, you ask for a really high premium to want to work as a cashier. And similarly, if you look at occupation codes that are very similar to a cashier, then the compensating wage differential disappears right away, which is exactly what we'd expect to see. Because if for you, the similar job is in fact like a cashier job. Now, what happens when you have conflict at home? And so what we propose in our model is that conflict changes the calculus of your migration. So when you have conflict at home, it makes you more insecure. To trade or you want to migrate not just for economic intentions but also for safety reasons. And when you do that, we show that your compensating wage differential, that additional premium, will start to in fact shrink. In order to test this, I'm going to skip over this and just show you some results right here. That's exactly what we see. If you look at the panel at the bottom, the compensating wage differential, how and what the effect of conflict on that is. So when you increase conflict by when you increase the log of conflict you are exposed to at home by 1, your compensating wage differential increases by 8 percentage points. It's a meaningful effect because we saw earlier that on average people the compensating wage differential in our data is about 20%. So 8 is about 40% of that. So it's a large meaningful decrease in your compensating wage differential, which goes on to show in fact what I proposed to you earlier. When you in fact when there is conflict at home, when there's insecurity at home, this in fact makes you accept or makes you more desperate to want to take on a job that you're overqualified for. And this result, by the way, is not random. You see that this is driven by, I'm just going to skip an ugly table here, just tell you that it's worse for women relative to men, it's worse for ethnic and religious minorities, it's worse for those who are underpaid, worse for those who have weak English skills, who have fewer migration networks, and once again worse for those whose area is contested between the military junta and the resistance groups. We do an IV estimation just to address measurement variation. I'm going to skip what both those are, but just that we find robust results to it. But I want to show you something interesting that happened. While our survey was in the field, the Myanmar military junta announced conscription. So you can imagine how audacious that was. Half the country is fighting the military regime, and then all of a sudden you say that in fact we're going to conscript young people, force them into actually joining the military. And you would expect this is exactly the kind of natural experiment where you can imagine that insecurity all of a sudden in the country increases. And this happened in the middle of our survey. And a lot of the eligibility for the conscription were in fact people who are in our sample, young people with a certain age bracket and who meet a certain criteria. And just to sort of reiterate the point that it is in fact conflict driving our results, what we do is, without getting too much into our differences directly, what we see is that those who are eligible for conscription the compensating wage or the effect of conflict on compensating wage differential was significantly worse for them as opposed to those who were not eligible for conscription. So taken together, I'll just quickly again and hopefully get you over lunch by saying that if you think about so taken together our results, including the results of the national experiment, they show that when you have a conflict type situation at home, it makes people, especially young people, make a grim compromise, which is that they would trade in their economic aspirations for safety. And what that does is it makes you accept jobs that you're overqualified for, and that's bad for everybody. That's bad for the individual. That's bad for the country losing out on a qualified person, and that's bad for the host nation as well, which is now where potential talent is now being wasted. And with that, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, that was a nice presentation. First, I have some kind of introduction to try to tell you at the same time. So, excuse my English. I had some remarks. I studied civic engineering and society engineering, and I was asking at the first question, I don't know if it can be just a one, maybe another for question about the possible or imaginary scenario. Say, imagine that, and stuff. So for me, intentions that are expressed may differ apparently from the real situation. So it's may differ greatly from the actual behavior. So for me, this is the first remark. Maybe in real life situation, are constraints, ethnicity, books, and these are people of family pressure and stuff. So they may completely alter. So they may completely alter the decision to leave for the Western family. And for the second remark, it's about occupation, truth, and the presence of unbelievable. Why? Because the study uses the mission of cashier, for me cashier as the example of less skilled worker. And this occupation maybe has a specific social image for me and specific working conditions that can influence reaction. So some people may find it more acceptable than other job, low-skilled job, and then other low-skilled jobs and other less, which distorts the element of this concentrate bonus for me, which is supposed to reflect only that. So this is for the second one. The third remark is about the influence of salary levels. There was some increasing and decreasing, like 20%, 30% and stuff. So for me, this type of progression, it can induce what we call recurring efficacy. What does it mean, recurring effect? For example, participants unconsciously, they can rely on these amounts to decide instead of indicating the true threshold they should spontaneously accept. I have some comments about the qualitative of the sample, but I think you, as it was shown in the presentation, I get to exclude the unemployed, less skilled or older workers who may have different regulatory behaviors and tolerance for downgrading. So this is true. I have some other remarks about the high impact of the countries by these results. I think I can stick with this, and thank you for this presentation, and it's been an honor to be with you.